Now, when we met 2 years ago, you said that you didn't really have any great political ambitions.
Yeah.
A few months later, you joined Cameron's Quality of Life Policy Unit.
Yeah.
And now you're running for MP for Richmond Park.
Well, you know, I'm
so
not...
I'd say, Zach, that you've got all the makings of a great politician.
Yeah. No, but you know what? I've always been sceptical of politics. Rightly so, I think. I think politics doesn't work in this country at all. I think there's a real problem with democracy in this country. I think the distance between people and power has grown to such an extent that the former have no control at all over the latter, and as a result people are disaffected and people aren't engaging in politics at all, in the same way that I haven't engaged in politics for most of my life. I've always felt, well, what the hell is the point? You know, it's not that people are apathetic. You had 1 million people marching against the war. You had 500,000 people marching against the ban on hunting, coming all the way into London from all over the country. You've got millions of people signed up to pressure groups, Friends of the Earth, Greenpeace, these kinds of organisations. 2 million people signed up to HACAN or something along that, but a huge number of people. Now, it's not that people don't care about politics, it's that they don't believe in politics. And I think that's the single biggest issue in this country. Now, when I signed up to the Conservative Party, it was actually before Cameron became leader. It was only a few months before. And I saw it as a huge challenge, and I wasn't necessarily holding my breath, but it was a challenge, and I took the view that the party was undergoing a rethink, much needed. It had been brutalised by the electorate 2 or 3 times in a row, and it needed to do that rethinking, and I didn't believe that it had done that at the time, and I wanted to be part of that. And the Conservative Party is a mass political movement, it's a battle of ideas, and I wanted to join that battle of ideas. When Cameron became leader, obviously it became much easier. He put the environment right to the top of the agenda, literally to the top of the agenda, and he commissioned what still is, I think, the biggest ever review of environmental policies ever conducted by a political party. And it was wonderful being part. I mean, for me it was a dream job. That's what I wanted to do. Not just because I want to get the Conservative Party's head around these issues and updated on environmental policy, but also because actually in Parliament there is a competition going on green issues at the moment. If you develop good ideas, they get pinched by the other side. Not enough of them have been pinched by the government, but it's certainly, I think it's indisputable that David Cameron has raised the bar on environmental issues in Parliament. You know, the discussion has absolutely changed on this issue, and that's great news. We're nowhere near where we need to be, I don't pretend we are, but a massive jump in the right direction.
So where do your political ambitions lie now? How ambitious are you?
Honestly, impossible to answer that, because I have no idea what it means to be in the cabinet. I remember interviewing Michael Meacher when he was the Environment Minister, and you know, he was a sunken man at the time. He was depressed. He felt that he hadn't achieved very much. I think he did, as it happens, but he was not someone who was chomping at the bit and enthusiastic about his job at the time. I would say his job satisfaction levels were pretty low. I went back and saw him again and interviewed him 2 or 3 months later after he'd been kicked out or resigned. No one really knows what happened. And he was a man who was liberated. He was out there campaigning on all the issues that he cared most about. If that experience is a general, accurate reflection of what it's like being involved on the back bench as opposed to the front bench, well then I suspect I'd be happier on the back than the front. But I just think there's an appetite in the Conservative Party now for really interesting thinking, and I find that very exciting at the moment. But I don't have, I mean, I have one goal at the moment from a national party point of view, and that is just to keep influencing this environmental debate. Just, you know, keep on looking for the examples of best practice, trying to work out what that means from a policy point of view, trying to sell that into the party. And I think at the top of the party that has happened. I think at the bottom of the party it's also happened. I think there's a bit of work to do in the middle of the party. But you know, I've spoken at probably 100 different Conservative groups, not including Richmond, but around the country, constituency organisations and so on. People are really enthusiastic about this stuff, and they may not all get it, but they want to get it, and they know that it's right. And they know, unlike some of the people in the middle of the party, I would say, they know that environmentalism is, or ought to be, a core Tory value. It really should be, you know, stewardship, looking out for future generations, conservation, efficiency, you know, limits. These are Conservative values, in my view. And I think most people in, you know, the core membership of the party get that, and certainly the top of the party gets it as well. So, you know, it is a good time to be involved in this, and I feel like it's worthwhile. I'm certainly enjoying it.
What do you think your father would make of you running as a Tory?
Well, I don't know is the answer. I think that he would be, I think if he was around today, he'd be getting involved in the debate as well. I mean, you know, he wasn't, Political parties shouldn't be seen as sort of football clubs. Once an Arsenal supporter, always an Arsenal supporter, always going to hate Chelsea, always going to hate Man U, all the rest of it. That's not really the way it should work. It's a fluid process. And no one owns the Conservative Party. It is a battle of ideas, and I have as much right to influence that. That process as any other member of the party. And that's what happens. And I think the right ideas are prevailing at the moment. I think the debate is really interesting and it's going in the right direction. When my father launched a campaign for a referendum on Europe, on the continued membership of the European Union, it was at a time when you couldn't do business with the Conservative Party. It had been in power too long, it was stubborn, it was reactionary, it was absolutely incapable of absorbing new ideas, and it needed to be slapped. And it got slapped, not just by him, but with the whole electorate. And I think every now and again that's essential. I think that's what's going to happen with this government as well. I think it's been in power too long, it's impossible to influence. I know this is an outsider campaigning for political change. Before signing up to the Conservative Party, it was literally impossible to influence anything in government. It doesn't matter what arguments you present to the government, it doesn't matter how much evidence you present. It's like throwing a ping pong ball against a brick wall. It's impossible. When a party's in opposition, that's when you really want to have that debate. And I think that David Cameron, without wanting to sound sycophantic, I think he's used his time in opposition incredibly valuably. Instead of sort of just playing ping pong ball with the government and scoring political points, he's actually cast the net out pretty far and wide, not just on environmental issues, but across the board. And the number of people who've come in and helped take part in that process is staggering. Our report alone, we had 500 plus people getting involved in that discussion. And the vast majority of those are people who are not signed up to the Conservative Party. We had, really broad spectrum of people helping us to try and get our heads around issues which and develop policies in areas where policies simply haven't been developed.
Would you say that there's a great silent majority in the UK? People that just get on with life, they pay their taxes, they just soldier on, that are just completely ignored and disenchanted?
I think there is a silent majority, but I think it's becoming less silent. I mean, the war against Iraq attracted 1 million people in the streets, and I think a lot of people there you would describe normally as a silent majority. There are 500,000 people marching against the government on the hunting ban, etc. However many people signed up against the road charging and so on. People are becoming more and more political, but not in a conventional sense. They're not political in a tribal sense, like they want their party to beat the other party, but they are getting engaged in the issues, which is why I think direct democracy is the key. I think people are just so disgusted with politics in this country. They feel that there's almost nothing, no matter what's promised by a political leader, nothing's going to happen as a result of that. And that is the case. It's indisputable. I mean, I spent 18 months looking at all these environmental policies. I'd come across ideas which were blindingly obvious, things that would lead to massive win-win scenario change, no downside. And I think, well, why the hell hasn't this already happened? And then I'd go back through the press releases, and 7 years ago, Tony Blair would have made exactly the same pledge. And you think, well, what's the point of simply repeating that pledge? The key is actually delivery. And I just think for whatever reason, government doesn't work. It just doesn't work. So the more you can strip away the powers from Parliament, which is what I'd like to do, and instead of handing them off to some even more distant authority like Brussels, I'd like to hand it back to people. I think that's the key. And that is something which can be applied across the board. I organised a referendum. It was sort of a mock referendum because it didn't have any teeth in law. In Barnes, there was a Sainsbury's being built. People didn't like it. Local authority was overruled by the National Planning Inspectorate, as ever, even though it's a very local issue. I organised for a referendum to happen, conducted by a professional organisation. We had a bigger turnout than in the general election. We had 85% of people voting against the Sainsbury's. And that's democracy. That's how it should happen. Now, their view should prevail. Absolutely should prevail. Now, as it happens, we haven't yet, I think we will, we haven't yet won that campaign. But we shouldn't have to continue campaigning. The referendum should have been enough. And I'd like to see the ability, I think it should be possible for local campaigners, local communities to initiate referendums on genuinely local issues. And I think it should be possible for people as a whole to initiate referendums on national issues, both blocking legislation and initiating legislation. It happens in some parts of the United States. It's really effective. That's how Governor Schwarzenegger took over. It was, there was a recall vote, which was based on a citizens' initiative. It happens in Switzerland. As a result, this recent list of Swiss referenda or referendums, I think is truly inspiring on GM food. All the issues that I care about have been discussed in Switzerland and voted on. And as a result, if you talk to people in Switzerland, they are politically literate in a way that we're just not in this country. What's the point of being politically literate in Britain if you have no access to power? If in Switzerland, people are the politicians.
But in microcosm, how much did that referendum in Barnes cost you?
Well, it wasn't just me paying for it, but it cost 5,000 quid.
Oh, right.
Which, given that most local campaigns of that sort would cost a hell of a lot more, I mean, I think that's value for money. And it's, you know, the consultation, if the local authorities had done it, would have been £20,000-25,000. The legal fees, you know, I mean, it's a tiny cost actually in the big scheme of things. You know, I went to an area consultation meeting in Kingston quite recently, where they were discussing whether or not to put a CCTV camera on one of the roads. Every single household had signed a thing saying they wanted it for security reasons or whatever. And whatever one thinks about CCTV, it's almost irrelevant. They all wanted it. It would have cost £5,000 to put in. But after an hour's discussion with local authority, the decision was that they would have a 3-month consultation and then decide. And the consultation itself was going to cost £10,000. And it just is absurd. A huge amount of waste in the process and no real democracy. Why not simply let people define their own community? Why not let people make these decisions for themselves? Why is a councillor or an MP or, you know, GLA member or mayor any better equipped to make those kinds of decisions than the people who are actually affected by those decisions? I don't think they are. There's no reason why. If I become an MP in Richmond, that's not going to qualify me on these kinds of judgments any more than I'm qualified now, or any more than you're qualified.